Good afternoon, and welcome to Americans for the Arts in the Arts Action Fund's office hours with our Arts Advocacy team. My name is Jay Dick, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Partnerships. I'm a 50-something white gay cis man with short brown hair, a graying beard, and I'm wearing a checkered purple shirt and a blue blazer. And I'm currently in my home office surrounded with mementos from my life. Americans for the Arts is committed to accessibility, and this includes our speakers offering visual descriptions of themselves, which makes the webinar more accessible for audience members that are blind or have low vision. Additionally, the Zoom-generated closed captions are available for audience members. You can access the closed captions by selecting the CC button for closed captions in your Zoom toolbar. The webinar also includes live American Sign Language interpretation, which you can access with the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar to select ASL interpretations. Please select interpretations in the Zoom bar and then select American Sign Language. And I welcome Monique and Tim, our sign language interpreters. Today, we have the Q&A feature of Zoom available for you to ask questions for our speakers throughout the webinar. We will do our best to answer all the questions either through the Q&A feature or out loud with the presentations from our speakers. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for you to review in the next week. You will also be able to find slides and additional resources on our website, which the link is being shared right now. In the event that we don't answer all the questions, and that is a very likely event because we have lots of questions, please reach out to Americans for the Arts Public Policy Manager, Olivia Tarpley, so we can keep in touch. And again, as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days. We have a wonderful group of folks that are joining us, and we're going to go through our agenda real quick. I'm delivering open remarks right now. We will then have our first panel with Tushar Swain of Americans for the Arts and Tiffany Gorley Carter of the National Council of Nonprofits. You will then have a chance to have some Q&A with them. Secondly, then we'll have a second panel with Olivia Tarpley and Nina Oslu-Tunsuli, who will give both of Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund, who will give you an update on our advocacy and federal updates, and then another Q&A session with that, and then we will come back and close out with that. I've mentioned a lot of our different speakers, so here is some of our Arts Action or our Arts Advocacy staff. So again, I'm Jay. You will hear from Tushar, Nina, and Olivia shortly, but we are here today and always to help you with your advocacy needs here at Americans for the Arts. We're so very happy to have our special guest speaker, Tiffany Gorley Carter. She is the Public Policy Director and Counsel at the National Council of Nonprofits. And if you're not familiar with the National Council of Nonprofits, you should. They are a wonderful group. They have been around for years. I've known and worked with them for over 20 years. They're a fabulous group, and we're so happy that Tiffany, that you're here to join us. Welcome, Tiffany, with that. With that, I do believe, looking at my agenda here, that we are going to transition into our first conversation with Tiffany and Tushar Swain. They're going to give you a little bit of an update of what's going on at the federal level with things that affect nonprofits. So with that, Tushar, I will let you and Tiffany take it away. Have fun.
Thank you, Jay. Hi, I'm Tushar Swain, Director of Public Policy. My visual description today is that I am a middle-aged man with brown skin, bald head. I have blue glasses on today. I am wearing a blue and yellow checkered shirt and green walls behind me. I'm going to introduce our guest. Tiffany Gorley Carter is the Public Policy Director and Counsel at the National Council of Nonprofits and works to advance the public policy priorities for the nation's largest network of nonprofits. Working in all three levels of government and all three branches of government, she tracks and spots trends of policy threats and opportunities for nonprofits. Tiffany covers a broad range of issues, including taxation, budget and spending, employment, government grants and contracts, advocacy rights, and regulations. She earned her BA magna cum laude from the University of Colorado, and her law degree from the University of Hawaii, receiving the Cali Award for Excellence in Nonprofit Organizations, and she is a member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar. So with that, welcome, Tiffany. I invite you to give a physical description of yourself, and then some background on the work that you do at National Council of Nonprofits. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Tushar. And thank you, Jay, for the introduction. I am a 30-something, half Japanese, half white female with long brown hair. I have a blue shirt, white blazer, and a background that says National Council of Nonprofits Champions for Public Good, because that's what we like to say we do every day. We like to champion, connect, and inform the nonprofit sector. Thank you to all of you for being on this call right now. We really need the arts right now. We really need some, joy and enlightenment and cultural experiences that will make, the nonprofit sector stronger, but, just in general, our society better. So we like to, say that we represent the entire nonprofit sector. We have, over 1.3 million nonprofits across the country, and you make up a big part of that. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you again. You're just truly a huge asset to the nonprofit community. Our first several office hours have been fairly art specific, focusing on executive actions that have been threatening the arts and culture community. But I think that the arts and culture community took note of the targeting of nonprofits even before the current administration, and that was in general when we saw HR 9495 in last Congress, which attempted to implement policies to revoke 501c status of nonprofits aiding and abetting terrorist organizations, with some very vague definitions on that. And I think that was something that a lot of our nonprofit arts communities took note of and really advocated, joined the rest of the nonprofit community to advocate for that not to pass. What are you hearing about that being reintroduced, or any other actions pertaining to that law? And also maybe just a brief explanation of what the legislation did last Congress.
Yeah, so HR 9495 is a big deal. It was introduced in, I believe, December. It passed the House. We have not seen it be reintroduced so far this year. And as you just said, Tushar, it would kind of limit who qualifies for nonprofit, like for 501c3 status, by claiming that if an organization, quote, supported a terrorist organization, that you could lose your status. So just to be very blunt and level setting, we don't want to support terrorists. That's a horrible, terrible thing. And I don't think anyone on this call does that, right? Like, that's root out bad actors where bad actors exist. And obviously we are not in the support of terrorism. So let's say 75% of the bill, totally fine. The portion that we were concerned about is this action of due process. It would provide the authority to a specific person, the Secretary of Treasury, to attach this unknown definition of supporting terrorism to an organization and then removes tax exemption from them. And so we're concerned about the due process portion. You should be able to argue, explain what you do, and not just have that authority in one person. So actually, I promise you that there will be breaking news during this conversation, Tushar. And just before I jumped on this call, I just saw a headline saying that the head of the IRS has been ousted. So that just happened literally about 3 minutes ago. So, that's a big deal. The IRS is the enforcement arm over the charitable sector. And, we're mission-based organizations. You are mission-based organizations. You exist because we need more beauty in the world. And because of that, we want to make sure that you are protected in all of these actions that are happening. HR 9495 is kind of this like starting point of what we're seeing now trickle, kind of come to, I don't know, a boiling point right now, literally today, of this expected, I don't know, attack on the sector. I would say there is, we have been hearing from pretty credible sources, and we expect this to be happening, and we're taking it very seriously. Some kind of version of, maybe not the same language, but the same kind of targeting of different groups in the nonprofit sector to remove their tax exemption. And we are hearing that there's going to be a package of executive orders maybe next week that would do this. So while it wouldn't be the same form, probably wouldn't be legislation. Maybe they'll reintroduce legislation, but the immediate, today I'm talking to you on Friday, April 18th. By next week, I think we're going to see a lot of things that might be targeting the nonprofit sector through executive action. And we have seen that to some degree already. There's over 120, I believe, executive orders, over 170 lawsuits against those executive orders. And some of them, directly affect nonprofits and are trying to, fine and determine who qualifies for charitable status.
I want to continue on some of this, targeting on the nonprofit sector. I guess just generally, though, speaking, it just does it does lend the question, and you all are at the forefront of this. But I think one of the questions we get is that these are happening via executive order. We have an administration who clearly hasn't been friendly to the nonprofit sector. So what can we do with regards to, our advocacy?
Yeah, so I mean, educate yourself. We have a lot of resources, and prepare yourself. Review your own internal documents, review your own mission statements, work with your board. Please clue your board into what's happening. And then, right now we are actually, there is this push and pull between the executive branch and the judicial branch right now, but we're also seeing it with the legislative branch. Call your member of Congress, tell them how these actions are directly affecting your organization, and lead with impact. Lead with what you do every day. They need to understand that, the nonprofits in their communities serve their communities, and you understand their communities sometimes better than they do, and you definitely understand your organization better than they do. And members of Congress often can't put those connections together. So whenever there's an executive order that comes out that's, for example, freezing funding that maybe your organization gets, or does something like adjust the regulations that might be affecting your organization, sometimes the members of Congress aren't, connecting those dots, and they need to hear from you to be able to do that. And the legislative branch is an equal third branch of government, and they should, be able to stand up and represent you, their constituents.
Thanks, Tiffany. So, just talking again about what, in what we're increasingly, seeing and feeling is a targeting of the nonprofit sector through what seems to be ideologically, ideological. The American Alliance for Equal Rights announced a couple of weeks ago that it has formally requested the IRS to open investigations into discriminatory practices of three prominent tax-exempt organizations. One that hit very home to the arts community was the Creative Capital Foundation. We're also seeing attacks on universities, most recently Harvard, particularly with the university threat. Can you speak to that and the work that you're doing on that right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, we are seeing this ramp up. As I just mentioned, we're looking at a boiling point as of right now. So we came out with a joint statement yesterday with Council on Foundations, Independent Sector, and United Philanthropy Forum, and us. We all signed on in support of Harvard. We see this as an attack on the sector, attempting to revoke, or having the intention to revoke an organization's tax exempt status based on ideological grounds is that's direct targeted attack. And Harvard as an educational institution, by definition, education by definition in 501c3 is a charitable act. It's very clear. And so, these other, as you mentioned, investigations or requests for investigation, I'm not sure exactly what the status of those are, whether it's a request or an actual active investigation at this stage, but those are, for ideological grounds, those are targeted attacks on the sector as far as we're concerned. And we are expecting there to be more of those with these executive orders coming out the next couple days, or possible executive orders in the next couple days. So, we see ourselves as the champions of the sector, along with all of our partners, just like you with the American, you as our partner, Americans for the Arts. Like, thank you for being a part of this group. That we need to represent the sector, and whenever there's these targeted attacks, we need to stand up and represent the sector properly.
Is it clear, particularly with the Harvard case, and maybe some of the others I've talked about, Creative Capital? I think that you all put out a statement, for example, on Vera Institute as well. Is it clear which executive order or orders they're tagging this to?
The Vera one, I think they're attaching it. I don't know if it's an exact executive order. I believe it was DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which has changed their names. We all still use DOGE because we know what that means. So it might be attached to the creation of DOGE, but I don't know if there's a direct which one. And it could be to the funding, federal funding. I believe that the left whenever they found out there wasn't any federal funding left at the Vera Institute. And that's just based off of media. Like, I have not been in touch with anyone at Vera, but that's what I read in the media. So I can't speak for them, but we did come out in, support of nonprofits are independent of the government. We are not part of the government. We should not be treated the same as government. And even if a nonprofit receives federal funding or other government funding, nonprofits earn about a third of their funding from governments at all three levels of government. That doesn't mean that you're a part of the government and that there is any authority to come into a private and independent organization and change things. If this was a for-profit government contractor, I mean, no one would be saying, oh, well, that for-profit government contractor is part of the government. No one would say that. But because we're nonprofits, they feel that they can. We are the most transparent sector of society. We, all of our information is out there. We file 990s. You have that information out there. And we sign contracts that are and sign grants just like for-profits. So there is a bigger picture question on like this attack of the sector. And I think you're hearing about it, going back to Harvard, you heard about it in these various educational institutions, but that I think is a piece of the bigger pie, which is what you're talking about, which is if they're going to ask for investigations into specific nonprofits, if they're going to start using the IRS for those types of ideological claims, then we need to show that there is a concerted effort to target the nonprofit sector.
Thanks, Tiffany. And another way that we've, seen a harm to the nonprofit sector is through federal funding freezes, and National Council for Nonprofits has really been out on the forefront on some of this work. Can you speak to that work and where things currently stand?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there's more than 120 executive orders, I think more than 170 lawsuits. We have 2 of them, and we have 2 preliminary injunctions. And I just found out yesterday that we were actually we were the second group to file a lawsuit against the executive orders. So we've been leading this and in front of this for a very long time at this stage. So right now we have two preliminary injunctions. They both deal with federal funding. And we have these nationwide preliminary injunctions. So the first one dealt with the funding freeze, the quote unquote funding freeze, where the Office of Management and Budget came out with a memo trying to freeze all federal funding within 22 hours. And we got a stay with that 3 minutes before it was supposed to go into effect. That has now become a preliminary injunction. And so all the funding that arose under that, which was $3 trillion worth of funding, should be opening up. What we heard, though, is some of these other funding streams that didn't fall under that OMB memo was still frozen. And this funding specifically was attached to the Unleashing American Energy executive order, which dealt with Inflation Reduction Act money and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money. And so just last week, we got a preliminary injunction under that as well. And so that funding should be opened up. If you have any of that funding and that funding has not opened up for you, please let me know. We are still working with the courts right now to make sure that that funding gets opened up. And I just heard about 20 minutes before I joined this call that one of the streams hasn't been unfrozen yet. So we need to put pressure through the courts to have that opened up.
Got it. And then are there just any anticipated next steps on the legal front? Is it kind of like a wait and see approach right now, or?
Yeah, so we're seeing what's going to come out with these executive orders. And who will be pulled into that. We have heard that various groups are kind of the same kind of groups have been talked about, environmental groups specifically. Also, for groups that receive foreign funding or do work internationally, but we're not quite sure what that will look like yet. So, as I mentioned, we're taking this very seriously, and we're trying to take steps to prepare for this. But without seeing it, it's hard to know exactly what it will look like. But we have heard that information kind of repeated in the last about 24 hours, 48 hours.
We've staying on the federal funding front, we've seen some of our federal cultural agencies decimated through executive order and by DOGE. For example, at the National Endowment for the Arts, some 1,200 grants have been canceled, as well as a substantial amount at the Institute for Museum and Library Services. You all have created a great resource on canceled grants. Can you talk about that and some potential just best practices for those who are in this unfortunate situation?
Yeah, I'm very sorry for those of you who are, find yourself in this position right now. So we do have a checklist on things to think about. The biggest thing is to read your contract or grant very closely and see the language in it. If you are capable of working with a law firm, go for it. But I understand a lot of organizations just don't have those means, right? But reading the grant very closely, or the contract, most of these are grants, I believe, and seeing what that language really is. And then if you have, administrator that still exists, a lot of these administrators just aren't there anymore. Try to find someone who you can connect with. But yeah, we have this checklist on how to think about it. But the biggest thing is read it, and don't be shy about this. Like, work with your boards, work with your EOs or your executive order, your executive team. Sorry, I say executive orders a lot, as you can tell. Your executive team on it, and try to determine what programs are really affected by those grants.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And to be clear, I think I made a mistake earlier. The National Endowment for the Humanities has been decimated by the DOGE with canceled grants, not the National Endowment for the Arts. I wanted to, and we will also drop that great resource on canceled grants. We'll drop that in the chat. Um, uh, Another area that we've gotten some questions on is the Johnson Amendment. You all have been on on the forefront of that as well. So could you just speak a little bit about the Johnson Amendment and some of the happenings in Congress related to that?
Yeah, so protecting nonprofit nonpartisanship is our number 110, number 500th priority. And you can see we have a lot of priorities right now, but making sure nonprofits remain nonpartisan is our number one and always has been and always will be. What the Johnson Amendment is, we don't even really like the term because it's kind of confusing because we have Speaker Johnson right now, but the Johnson Amendment refers to then not even President Johnson, before he became president, he was a Senator Johnson, so it's very confusing. Anyways, it's the portion of 501c3s that says that you cannot support or oppose candidates for office. It says it's really simple. All of you live this every day. You don't even think about it because it's, a part of our ethos and daily lives. But what it does is it keeps partisan politics out of nonprofits. It allows you to remain mission focused and creating art and cultural experiences and not engaging in partisan politics. It does not mean that you cannot advocate. You can and should advocate. You can and should lobby to protect, on the issues that matter to your organization. You just cannot support or oppose candidates for public office. And over the years, there has been attempts to either eliminate or weaken this provision in 501c3. Just last week, a bill called the Free Speech and Fairness Act was reintroduced. It's been reintroduced, I think, most Congresses over the years, and it would weaken this provision by allowing charitable nonprofits to engage in partisan activities in the ordinary course of business, undefined, don't know what that means, as long as you do not incur a de minimis amount, undefined, don't know what that means. Our take on this is that it's allowing partisan politics to come in and work with nonprofits and basically use nonprofits for partisan gain. So the easiest example I have is, think about all the partisan political ads you see every election cycle. Probably still going on because they're all the time everywhere. This provision would allow those people creating the partisan ads to use nonprofits, charitable nonprofits, and receive a charitable deduction to create those ads. It would allow any given candidate to come in and say, "Hey, can you paint my portrait and then I'll use it as my use it for my own campaign, and we'll even give you $1 million for that," kind of thing. And then they would take a charitable deduction to do it. So we see this as a horrible, terrible thing. We don't want politicians, candidates coming into our organizations. So there is a bill that would do that. We are opposed to that bill. There's also attempts previously in 2017, there was an attempt to include that type of language in the 2017 tax bill. We got it out at the 11th hour. And we don't want to see it again in this current 2025 tax reform that's happening right now. So we're, making sure that that's not happening as well.
Great. Thank you for all of that great insight, Tiffany. It's been incredibly helpful. I'm going to bring in Jay here to help facilitate some Q&A that some questions our audience might have.
So thank you, both of you, for a wonderful panel there to really some really great information. And I was jotting down notes throughout the entire time too. So Tiffany, we have 3 people that asked this same question. You've talked about, if you've received an award and it's kind of been clawed back, what you should be doing. What happens if, and I'll read this, my NEA grant for an arts project is on hold, meaning the NEA hasn't turned our offer into an award in their system. This is $70,000 to us. What should we be doing about that? So it's not quite to be clawed back. It just hasn't, it's been maybe a letter of intent or a letter of award, but not, signed contract or anything.
Yeah, so it's tricky, and unfortunately we're hearing this a lot. That's, the first thing is really read your contract or grant. I would say reach out to your member of Congress for sure and explain what's going on. And if you have the ability to get an attorney, you can. I understand that is unrealistic for most organizations, and we understand that. But I do feel, it's my obligation to mention that as a possibility. It, keep us abreast with this information, keep Tushar, but up to date on this too. And we're trying to open up this funding depending on where it's coming out of, but unfortunately it doesn't seem like the NAA or NEH money is really attached to any of our lawsuits. So, we don't have a whole lot more information there, unfortunately.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I'll just give Nina a heads up for our next panel. I'm probably going to ask you the same question to see if you have any other thoughts on this too. So Tiffany, another one of our questions that we had was, around, do you have any resources for how you can instruct nonprofits to know their rights with regard to immigration, if they're happy to have immigrants in their buildings or whatever? Do you have any great resources for people so they know what can and can't be done?
Yeah, so I don't think we did have a couple so we individually, we NCN, sorry, not individually, we NCN do not have like the best practices for this. We are definitely not immigration experts, but we do have some resources for, I believe, the immigration legal services organizations. And we would definitely point you to them.
And I do note in the chat here, there's some folks talking about some accountants and lawyers for the arts in this case, Texas. And I know they're in a lot of other different states too. So be reaching out to some of those folks there too. A question about the executive order ending taxpayer subsidization, I can't talk today, of open borders. How that impacts arts organizations that are, applying to the NEA for programs that maybe that's in public schools that serve undocumented youth. Any ideas or recommendations of what our arts organizations could be doing that are in that situation where they're in the public schools and there might be undocumented kids there? Is there anything that they need to worry about?
Yeah, unfortunately, immigration is just an area that I just don't have the expertise in. And so, yeah, I don't have much to add for that. I would definitely say the same thing as the immigration groups, like reach out to them, because I really don't want to give incorrect advice on any of this. And I mean, I should say I'm not giving any legal advice at all, but this is somewhere that I think is very touchy, and I don't want to misspeak here.
Mm-hmm. One other question here, a very broad question. So, what are the best current steps being taken to counter current and future executive orders, and the best ways to back those efforts?
Yeah, so we are checking our web pages, regularly to try to be on top of these executive orders as they come out. We're updating we have a chart on the executive order. So the ones that we're seeing that, directly affect or indirectly affect the nonprofit sector at large, we're including on our chart. There is a section of immigration, but not all the nitty gritty on immigration, which is what I think you're asking, which some of these questions go to. But keep an eye on our chart, because we do want you to know what's happening. We actually just overhauled it to include some of the biggest lawsuits that are happening with it. You can reach out to those groups that are filing on the various executive orders. And then just kind of be like preparing, right? So have some statements in preparation if one comes up that is going to affect the arts crowd or art, your type of mission. Be in touch with your board if you do need to act quickly so that they're prepared too. Sometimes it's a bigger organization discussion, not just, a quick, someone with some more authority might need to be involved. And then be in touch with your members of Congress and be prepared to like explain how this one affects your organization whenever it does happen. I would say is the easiest way to advocate on your own behalf.
Tiffany, just one final question. With these executive orders and federal funding issues, those are certainly on top of mind, but you also are, you and National Council of Nonprofits are the experts on tax issues affecting nonprofits. Can you talk a little bit about what you're advocating for in tax reconciliation this year?
Yeah, so the biggest one is keeping any threats to the Johnson Amendment or nonprofit non-partisanship out. As for putting things in or supporting nonprofits, we are big supporters of the Charitable Act, which would create a non-itemizer deduction, which means regardless of whether you take the standard deduction or you itemize your deductions on tax day, which was just a few days ago, so I hope you all filed. You can get a charitable tax deduction for your donations to nonprofits, because whether you give $5, $15, $500, it shouldn't be how much you make. You should still be able to receive those tax deductions and donate and support your organizations. The other piece that we're in support of is increasing charitable giving in times of disasters. So we see giving spike in disaster zones when they're happening. It makes sense. You see a horrible hurricane or recently, like in last fall, or the wildfires in California, or mudslides in Tennessee, whatever they might be. People want to give, and we want to make that easier. And if there's a declaration of a disaster and you give in that area, you should be able to get a non-itemizer deduction there as well. So we're supporting that. And then back to Tushar, you and I's bigger conversation at the start is like protecting nonprofit status in all of this. We don't want them to use removing status or removing charitable deductions for different giving in it as pay-fors. So, and they have talked about that, increasing payout rate, or not payout rates, increasing excise tax on university endowments. Like there are various ways that they're looking to chip away at the nonprofit sector to use as pay-fors to pay for these tax cuts. We didn't take a position on the tax cuts. They can do whatever they want with the tax cuts. Just don't use nonprofits to do it, is our position. And so we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen as well.
Thanks, Tiffany. Can you speak to anything with related executive orders, anticipated executive orders on the environmental front? You and I had a conversation about that prior.
Yeah, so we're hearing that we're hearing pretty strong credibility that this is happening in the next week, maybe as soon as Tuesday, maybe as soon as today, or any minute. But what we've been hearing is maybe on Earth Day having a way of thinking. I anticipate the executive orders, if there is one, that would target environmental groups to kind of redefine what charitable action is, and for environmental surveying organizations, which is very troublesome. And that would also be targeting the nonprofit sector on trying to redefine what qualifies as charitable is very, very concerning.
Tiffany, one last question for you. Are you hearing anything about any potential executive orders on nonprofit newspapers or basically anything on the media?
On the media? No, but I wouldn't be surprised. So I think this environmental one has been the one that's been sucking up all the air right now. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I think between the AP being that issue with the White House, general, back to the universities, this kind of attack on the First Amendment, and what constitutes free speech. That is circulating. And so while I haven't heard about a specific EO on the media, it makes sense.
Fortunately, it does. Well, Tiffany, Tushar, thank you so much for our opening panel for this office hours session. There's been a lot of great information here. And Tiffany, I encourage you, people are still putting notes into or questions into the Q&A. If you're able to stick around for a little bit, take a look at the Q&A and try to help out with anything like that. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. And again, the National Council of Nonprofits is a wonderful organization. Everyone go take a look at their website, sign up for their e-list, whatever you can do to support them, because they're wonderful supporting to our industry here. Thank you, Tiffany. With that, I'm going to invite our next panel to join us. We have Olivia Tarpley, who is our public policy manager. And then following Olivia is going to be Nina Oslu-Tunsley, who's our chief counsel and is also the executive director of the Arts Action Fund. I believe, Olivia, you are starting off. So welcome, Olivia, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. Good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate you all being here with us today. Like Jay said, my name is Olivia Tarpley, and I'm the Public Policy Manager here at Americans for the Arts. I'm a white woman with curled shoulder-length brown hair, and today I'm wearing a light blue blouse. I'm seated in my home office in Washington, D.C. with a piece of art on the wall behind me. So I'm going to discuss our future outlook with fiscal year 2026 congressional appropriations, recognizing this is just a small piece of the larger puzzle of all of the things happening with the federal government. And then I will be turning it over to my colleague Nina, who will discuss funding issues happening right now, current lawsuits, and other updates from the federal government. So the appropriations process is underway for fiscal year 2026. Just in the past couple of weeks, both the House and Senate appropriations committees have released their guidance for the year. And part of that process includes members of Congress hearing from constituents through their appropriation portal requests about programmatic funding. Most members of Congress have a system through their website where individuals can enter funding requests for fiscal year 2026. Sometimes this system includes a Google form or Microsoft Forms or otherwise a portal, quote unquote, on their website. And the more requests that a member receives, the more likely they are to request that amount to congressional appropriators. By submitting an appropriations portal request, you are telling your member of Congress that they should make certain programs a priority when they are determining what to fund. And this kind of request is an official request to support federal programs that are helpful to communities. And one way to think about these requests is like applying for a grant. If you don't apply for the funding, then you're not being considered for the funding. So that's why Americans for the Arts has really been focusing on this part specifically of the appropriations process alongside many partners in the field so that we can have the best possible chance of getting funding for the cultural institutions in, again, this is specifically for fiscal year 2026 appropriations bills. So we have a comprehensive appropriations portal guide that has a template for 5 different appropriations requests. That includes the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, Arts Education Programs, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So if you would like to learn more about, again, this small piece of the puzzle, looking into the fiscal year 2026 appropriations process, I would love to connect with folks. I think my email will be put into the chat so that we can connect. And at that point, I'll go ahead and turn things over to my colleague, Nina, to talk more about the broader landscape.
Thank you, Olivia. And I think you should also put in a link to our website for being like a self-guided tour of how to submit these portal requests. Hello, everybody. Nina Oslu-Tunsley, and my visual description is I'm a Middle Eastern woman with long black hair and a beautiful Arts Vote poster behind me that was designed exclusively for the Arts Action Fund by the famous artist Shepard Fairey. So I'm going to go ahead and begin and kind of fill in some information about what's happening in Congress right now, information about the cuts that are happening while we speak, that DOJ and executive orders are doing, and then where we go from here. So first of all, I want to make sure, because it took me a long time personally to understand the difference and impact of what we hear in newspapers all the time about something called reconciliation package, and the difference between that and the appropriations process. So I'm going to first start with reconciliation because that's what had to happen in January, February, March, and culminated in April. And what that is a vehicle to really get around the issue that the Senate has this ability to filibuster and therefore require the majority, which only currently has 51, maybe 52 Republican senators, to be able to pass a bill with only that simple majority of 51, as opposed to if the Democrats were to do a filibuster, 60 votes. So with 60 votes, very hard to get that passed. So the reconciliation bill is being used. What can reconciliation bill be used for is not the discretionary appropriations that we usually talk about, that Olivia just talked about in terms of submitting requests to the portal for funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, for arts education, the list goes on. What the reconciliation package is about is really tax reform legislation, and also increasing the debt ceiling to be able to accommodate that. But Republicans are in charge and they don't like increasing the debt ceiling. So they're trying to limit how much the debt ceiling is to accommodate the president's tax packages that he campaigned for, of one, extending and maybe even making permanent the tax reform bills of lowering taxes for corporate filers, lowering taxes for high wealth individuals, the standard deduction, things like that. But now he's also adding no taxes on tips for those working in the restaurant industry, and no taxes on Social Security benefits for those who are already collecting Social Security. And there are a bunch of other things, but those are the ones that you hear about the most. Well, that costs a lot of money. And so in order to offset that, the House and the Senate have to make significant cuts. If they can't increase the debt ceiling over a certain amount, they have to balance it out. Whatever the tax reform package reduces income to the U.S. Treasury as a result of reducing tax liabilities on all of these special interests, they have to cut within a certain category of spending expenditures like Social Security itself, Medicaid, which is the one you've probably heard the most about. And then there are cuts that can happen to authorizing committees that control things like how much the maximum is for military, which is something they want to increase in this. But they want to cut heavily things like the funding to the Department of Education. If something like this goes through, a lot of the money that DOJ cut in Department of Education, there's talk about, oh, they'll just send it to the states. But if the authorization level of how much can go to the Department of Education, or the ghost of the Department of Education, is going to be severely cut, and who knows how little will go to the states. None of that's clear yet, because now that the House has made its final numbers on what the overall reconciliation would be, it would be cutting 1.5 trillion, that's with a T, $1 trillion in these kinds of programs. That's why you hear Democrats saying, look out for your Social Security, because they don't know how they're going to get to that number without getting close to Social Security, but they're definitely going to make major cuts to Medicaid. Whereas the Senate is only cutting $4 billion with a B as opposed to trillion. And so they're already off to a very bad start in terms of cuts. And it will eventually have an impact on discretionary spending on things like the arts, but not a direct impact. So we then go, and all this action that I just talked about is going to happen in the month of May. It's already begun in April, but the major action is going to happen in May. I don't think that they're going to be able to finalize it because I don't think they're going to be able to agree, but we'll see. So simultaneously, the appropriations process has what I would call gently started. And I say gently only because some rules about like whether they're going to allow earmarks, both the House and Senate are allowing what we call earmarks, but they have a more fancy term like community spending, things like that, directed community spending. What you should know is this current year, there was never a final omnibus appropriations bill. What happened is there was a year-long continuing resolution. When that happens, only the appropriation numbers for the agencies and things like that come through to this year, but the earmarks were left on the editing table, as you might think. And so there were no earmarks that were in this year. The chances of it being another long-term continuing resolution is very high. So even though you might consider like putting a lot of effort into an earmark, I don't know if it's going to be worth your time. But that's just me looking into my little crystal ball there. But if you are an organization that was successful in getting your member of Congress to get an earmark into the appropriations bill for the House side and into the appropriations bill for the Senate side last year, but it didn't happen because of the long-term CR. There, I would put some effort in because it's simply like updating the year and maybe a few other items that are unique within the proposal, and your member can reintroduce it. The chances that they would favor something that was approved the previous year to give it a chance this year, I think is higher, but it's still not in that category of will we have an omnibus bill so that it can go through on the omnibus bill, or will it be a long-term CR where it will be cut, all earmarks would be cut again? So that's to kind of give you some information on that. The timing of appropriations. Olivia has started the portal process, which is so important to put in, even for these agencies that are pretty much dismantled, like IMLS, NEH. I think it's still worth it to put it in for funding for FY26 because the White House has definitely taken the first shot at like trying to kill off these agencies, but a combination of Congress weighing in and lawsuits being litigated, there are chances that things might change. So there is a time limit on when you have to get these portal requests in. And Olivia has that on that designated URL that she's posted. I think it should still be done. It's primarily for the rest of this month of April and maybe a little bit of May because the Senate has longer deadlines. But there's a time period that you got to do that in. So I recommend that you do it. It's important for members of Congress to see that the arts and culture has not given up just because of these executive orders. We are fighters and we're united in our fight. And I don't think what you see today is what we're going to end up with. I think we're going to get something better. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but that's what I think, and that's what I'm fighting for. In terms of when the appropriations process will play out, at near the second half later in June, you'll start to see House markups moving into floor votes, and we'll be doing a lot of advocacy during that time that we need to engage all of you on. So that's the timing of that. And for the Senate, they always do things a little bit later. They'll probably start markups in July and finish after the August recess in September. The month of August is pretty much no congressional work will be done unless an exception is made, which rarely happens. And your members of Congress will be back home, where you can even set up individual meetings with them. There are a lot of things that we'll be doing webinars on to help prepare you on what to do in those occasions. In terms of how these cuts are happening that we're seeing at NEH and IMLS, even though the continuing resolution for FY25, which is where we're at right now, how is that possible? You're thinking to yourself, Congress passed the money. They're supposed to have that money. And DOJ is coming in on the NEH side and just unilaterally cutting it with the approval of the White House. And with the executive order, IMLS is being dismantled. And soon more things will be coming. I really think what's next up is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Yesterday, we got the unfortunate news that AmeriCorps is being dismantled. People working out on the field for national disasters as we speak are being told to put down your shovels, put down your water hoses, and go to the nearest regional AmeriCorps offices to conclude your time. You'll be on administrative leave until the end of April, and then you'll be terminated. It's really, really terrible things, but we need to document how bad they are so Congress hears it, so the American public hears it. We need a higher volume public outcry on what's happening in Washington, D.C. So they're able to make these cuts, and what's happening is that this is what's called a form of impoundment, which has a Supreme Court case behind it that says that the executive branch can only stop payment on funds that were appropriated by Congress for a certain number of days. And if it goes beyond those days, which we're getting close to, if it goes beyond those days, this becomes impoundment, which is not allowed by the executive branch. President Trump wants to take that case to the Supreme Court with multiple examples of impoundments that he is going to hold over beyond that time period. So what Congress is worried about is who are trying to help the president, including at the top of that list would be Speaker Johnson of Louisiana, is don't risk moving into impoundment. Instead, put a rescission package together. And that it appears to be the next step that's going to happen. A rescissions package that codifies all of the cuts that the White House has made of FY25 funds that have gone to everything from Department of Education, AmeriCorps, NEH, IMLS, all of those cuts plus so many more of other federal agencies, to put them into one large rescission package to take to Congress to say, okay, these are the cuts that we've made. We want Congress now to pass it. And the issue is going to be, this is not a reconciliation package. This is going to require more than a simple majority in the Senate to get passed. And I think they're going to run into problems. So we're going to see about what happens with that and with lawsuits that are going to be related to that. I see my colleague Jay has appeared, which means I have to just pause for a moment so questions can be taken, and if there's more time, I'll continue with the rest of the little bit that I have left.
Thank you, Nina. We have some really good questions here that I do want to make sure we get time to. So I'm going to ask you the same question as I asked Tiffany earlier, because the conversation is still going on about this, about NEA grants that maybe were, notified, but maybe haven't been authorized, or whatever the legal list is, or the legal check off there. What can you say about that, and what can we be doing to try to help out?
Yeah, I don't know about helping out, but here's what I think I know. I'm going to phrase it that way because things change every day. Okay, so yes, there were grants that went through the Biden administration and were theoretically awarded, but it happened very close to the time of when the Trump administration was brought into office in January. So there, I believe, is an informal, I'm going to call it, hold on going through these, not because of DOGE, not because of an executive order, but because they at the NEA want to go through and read all of those, and it's probably over 1,000. I don't know for a fact, but I think it's a large amount. They want to go through all of those grants and reread all of the proposals with a new set of fresh eyes, keeping in mind what the new administration is saying federal agencies can and cannot do. Things like DEI, gender ideology, other this whole terrorist stuff. They want to reread it to make sure none of those proposals that were awarded have that kind of an impact, or maybe even give an opportunity. I don't know this part, but maybe even give an opportunity for the grantee to possibly modify. I think that is what's causing the holdup. I don't think it's anything related to DOGE and executive, except the impact of executive orders.
Thank you. We have a couple questions about class action lawsuits. Is there any stuff going on already? And then if something hits the NEA, do we envision there will be lawsuits to help defend the NEA?
So are we talking, I don't know if the person can clarify in the Q&A, are we talking about a class action of grantees, let's say at NEH and IMLS, where they've actually been canceled?
Yeah, so I paraphrase. So let me read the actual question to you. What is the outlook for class action suits on behalf of large groups of NEA, NEH, and other grantees whose grants may have been improperly terminated?
Right. So it doesn't apply to NEA at the moment. They have not terminated, canceled any grants whatsoever that I know of. And you should let me know if they have. That would be of interest to me. But NEH and IMLS have definitely canceled contracts. So if this is a question about the actual grantees coming together in a class action suit, I don't know of any that have been filed, and I don't know any of them that are starting to request grantees to be added. There might be other agencies where this is happening that I don't know about, but so far I don't know of any, but it could be a possibility because there are certainly rights. And one thing that I would really like to underscore, if you do have a canceled contract, the way contracts are written or grants are written between NEH and IMLs, I think could be different. But the advice that we're hearing from the Association of American Museums is that IMLS grants can be appealed. And if you do get a canceled contract, you should formally request an appeal, even though, they may not do anything with it at the moment. It is something that is part of your due process that you can do.
So you just actually partially answered this question. We had another question about if specifically the question, the person asking the question, if our IMLS grants were terminated, should we be engaging an attorney? What actions are being taken? Is there a class action lawsuit? So you already said appeal. So how about class action, and what other steps should they be taking?
Right. I mean, like I said, I don't know of a class action suit that is afoot yet. And there might be, and please let me know so I can research more about it. And then we'll bring someone to interview at our next office hours that can talk about the class action suit. But I don't know of any yet. But individually, as an organization that has received a cancellation notice of your IMLS grant, you should, at minimum, don't wait for a class action suit. You have a time period within that you have to appeal if you feel like, and I think everybody feels like it was unfairly done. You should appeal that.
Getting your crystal ball back out, will there be lawsuits to push back against the assaults on nonprofit 501c3 statuses?
Yes, I think there will be. But just the one thing that needs to be clarified is that these assaults on nonprofits, including the Gates Foundation, LeGrand Foundation, Creative Capital, Harvard, these are big names to start the chill effect on nonprofits and foundations. And I think it's working. I think people are really chilled by what's happening. But I think it's going to increase what's happening to universities and to foundations and things like that. I think this upcoming executive order that's probably going to happen on Earth Day, October 22nd, is, while it might have a focus on climate control issues and science related to that, it's going to apply to DEI too. And it's both foundations and other kinds of funders, individuals, corporate funders and foundations, on somehow trying to restrict them giving to those kinds of causes. But it might be written in an even broader way, like I said, including DEI issues, which I've already seen a foundation that is, well, Harvard is the best example, being affected by DEI issues. But what I want to tell you is that these are happening in a little bit more of a sinister way, I'm going to say, where a very conservative foundation out of Austin, Texas, that Tushar referred to, is filed a referral, not a lawsuit, but a referral to the Internal Revenue Service. And there are literally forms for this that the IRS has, and files a referral saying why they think the 501c3 status of a particular foundation, university, should be removed. And the focus was on their DEI work, because they do college scholarships, they do artist scholarships, and this is primarily LeGrand Foundation, Gates Foundation, and Creative Capital Foundation. It's because of their DEI scholarship work where money is involved. They think that that is against the law because it is a form of discrimination. And who are they discriminating against in their mind? Are Caucasian people. So it's really kind of weird. And this is absolutely not just because of what I'm referring to of the nonprofits and these foundations, but this, with Harvard especially, is definitely going to go to the Supreme Court. And that is exactly what the White House wants, because they want to change what it means to discriminate. Okay.
So let's switch a little bit. We've been talking about what's going on now. We only have a couple minutes left here, but I have one last question for you. Looking forward, we have elections coming up in some states in November of this year and federal elections again next year. What are those topics that would resonate well with people running for elected office around the arts, around everything that we're talking about. So what should arts organizations be talking about when they're seeking to educate candidates for elected office?
Right. So remember, C3s can endorse, they can educate though, just like Jay said. So I would focus on the devastating losses happening in your community in that particular congressional district, or if it's a state level election in your state, documenting the devastating losses to the arts, humanities, both with stories of, these are community providers, these cultural organizations. How is it also affecting the final recipients of that? Kids programs, after school programs, anything like that. I would focus on that, and I would focus on data points as well. Jobs lost, people going on unemployment as a result of jobs lost. Like, take it to the next step. Just saying job loss, they've heard it a million times. Saying, but then adding, they're on unemployment. It's not like they found another job. This is costing the state money to put people on unemployment, things like that.
Perfect. Nina, if you want to take 1 minute to finish up whatever your pre-prepared remarks are, and then we will close out our webinar today.
Okay, I was just going to add that a little update on some lawsuits. For instance, there are 2 lawsuits for IMLS. One was filed by the 21 states attorney general. That is still in progress. But the one that was filed after that has gotten a little bit faster action, but I don't know the results yet. And that's the one filed by American Library Association in partnership with the Association of Government, State, and Local Employees. So it's a union of government, state, and local employees partnering with American Library Association. And that was filed in DC. And I have been on Zoom calls all day, but at 10 a.m. they had their first hearing. And it was for a preliminary injunction to stop the cuts and the layoffs that happened at IMLS. So stay tuned, whether it's an e-blast that we send out to let you know the results or the next office hours webinar.
Thank you, Nina. And thank you to all of our speakers, Olivia, Tiffany, and Tushar. Before we go, I just wanted to point out a couple little things. We have some wonderful information for everyone that's available on the Americans for the Arts website and the Arts Action Fund website. We have a wonderful breaking news timeline that is on the website there on the Arts Action Fund website. I believe we'll be dropping some links in here soon. We've given you a lot of information. This timeline just shows you step by step, day by day, what's been going on to help us all keep track of stuff, because it's so hard to keep track of things. We have our comprehensive executive order guide, so you can keep up to date on what's going on with that. And then we also have something to do if you want to take action. Right now, people want to take action. So we always have our advocacy site. So write to your member of Congress. We have a pre-done letter for you that you can write and customize. Please customize it to write. You're going to be hearing more things from the Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund of things you can be doing from your wherever you live or work here in the United States. So lots of things. Stay tuned. Reminder, our next office hours is 2 weeks from today, and then every 2 weeks after that, so May 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. We hope you can join us with that. And with that, again, I wish to thank, again, all of our speakers. I want to also thank Morgan Fernari and Mattel Lyons-Warren, 2 of our Government Affairs and Arts Action Fund staff and program staff, to say thank you for your behind-the-scenes work to help us out today. We couldn't do it without you. With that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for all that you do, and keep fighting. Have a great weekend.